global stock market's daily trading volume averages $264 billion worldwide, and this is broken down into the daily average of $50 billion in the United States, £6 billion in the UK, and 4.5 billion Australian dollars in Australia alone. For the past 200 years, we've all been trading via the traditional stock market, a tried and tested way of investment, a regulated, centralized and geographically limited market, offering an extremely low speed of liquidity. And in 2017 came the global ICO craze, where over 430 cryptocurrencies emerged, amassing a total of $5 billion worth of coins. However, most of these coins failed in a spectacular fashion due to lack of regulation. ICO, also known as Initial Coin Offering, is a decentralized blockchain concept which boasts global availability. However, it is not available for listing on major exchanges, thus the reason it lacks control and regulation. A major shift is happening in the world of finance right now as we speak. S.T.O, also known as Security Token Offering, is offering the best of both worlds, securing its place as the next big thing since ICOs. S.T.O uses blockchain technology, and it is regulated under the traditional stock market. This allows blockchain and cryptocurrencies to restore some much-needed credibility. While traditional securities are slow and expensive, security tokens facilitate services at a lower cost. They are also traded on specialized security exchanges, providing investors with a convenient way to liquidate their assets. With S.T.O, we are no longer restricted geographically, as borders or regional regulations do not limit security tokens. Whether we like it or not, the world is rapidly changing right in front of our eyes, and our capability to transform and adapt is what ensures both our survival and success. Welcome to the equilibrium, a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced, because for every yin, there will be a yang. And much like yin and yang, achieving the ideal balance between the two markets is vital to the progress of the financial ecosystem, and that is the guiding principle at the heart of Uni-Equilibrium, or Uni-E, the new token created within the Unihash Smart Contract blockchain technology. A total of 420 million coins will be issued, with 40% released via mining. Uni-E is the base cryptocurrency for S.T.O transactions, and the Unihash board is the S.T.O gateway under the Sydney Stock Exchange. With more than 2,000 companies featured in the Unihash board soon, the choices and potential are truly limitless. This is a call to action, to be a part of an ecosystem where all the action lies. The birth of a new arena, where you get the best of both worlds. The start of a new dream, where you can trade with peace of mind. And that is the beauty of the equilibrium.
One. Pot of Thrones About Podcast. Jeff and Jennifer from the Kid-Free Weekend Podcast love Game of Thrones so much that it go its own show. Join us as we recap new episodes, discuss theories, and play games. Frequency about 3 posts per month. Since March 2016 podcast P.O.W.E Thrones. Libsyn. Com Facebook fans 121. Twitter followers 5,999. 2. Binge Mode, Game of Thrones About Podcast. As winter is here, join the Ringers Mallory Rubin and Jason Concepcion as they take their signature deep dive on the final season of Game of Thrones. Frequency about 4 posts per month. Since June 2017 podcast Stitcher. com/podcast/The Rin. Facebook fans 12,847. Twitter followers 46,957. 3. Podcast Winterfell About Podcast. Podcast Winterfell podcast is dedicated to HBO's Game of Thrones. After each new episode of HBO's Game of Thrones airs, you'll get a week of 4 different shows. Frequency about 4 posts per month. Since March 2012 podcast Stitcher. com/podcast/podcast. Facebook fans 385. Twitter followers 3,097. 4. Game of Owns, Game of Thrones podcast about podcast. Stream over 400 episodes podcasting HBO's Game of Thrones. Watch along, read along, join the show season by season, chapter by chapter, with visits from actors, artisans, and producers of the series. Frequency about 2 posts per month. Since March 2012 podcast Game of Thrones.com/episodes. Facebook fans 5,643. Twitter followers 14,153. 5. Boars, Gore, and Sword. San Francisco About Podcast. Join us each week as stand-up comics Ivan Hernandez and Red Scott discuss the world of HBO's Game of Thrones and George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. Frequency about 4 posts per month. Since June 2011 podcast Boars, and Swords.com/catog. Facebook fans 2,367. Twitter followers 3,221. 6. Close the Door, Game of Thrones podcast about podcast weekly. Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth fan podcast discussing Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. For more updates, follow us. Frequency about 3 posts per month. Podcast Closeted and Come Here Pod. Facebook fans 96. Twitter followers 1,280. 7. History of Westeros, Game of Thrones about podcast. Come obsess over A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones with us. Our show is an enthusiastic and heavily detailed look at the past, present and future of Westeros and the realms beyond. Frequency about 3 posts per month. Podcast Podbean.com/podcast today. Facebook fans NA. Twitter followers 21,711. 8. Nerdette recaps Game of Thrones Chicago, Illinois about podcast. Peter Segal joins Greta Johnson and Trisha Bobbitt of Nerdette Weekly to scrutinize the latest Game of Thrones episode.